So he traces back to Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, of course, is a Genevan, Swiss philosopher and man of letters of the 18th century. So his dates are 1712 to 78. And very quickly, so Rousseau locates identity in the inner psychological life of the individual. So this is what Truman says is the beginning of the psychologization of the human being, right? So for Rousseau, feelings are central to who we are. Does that sound familiar to anyone? It's like this is the air we breathe. Authenticity, another very important word for the modern individual. Authenticity is tied to the outward expression of inner feelings, right? So who I am is not, the role I play in society, which in other society, okay, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son. Who I am is the roles I play. No, who I am is my own private, personal kind of inner feelings. That's the primary locus of who I am. And to be authentic means that I live outwardly exactly in accord with my inner feelings. Now you can say, fine, but your inner feelings need to be controlled and they need to be, molded, and they need to be shaped, and they need to be trained, right? And Rousseau probably would have agreed with that. But again, the seeds get set. And then as this idea develops, it becomes more and more like whatever I feel inside is who I truly am deep down. And for me to live authentically, I must be able to live outwardly how I feel inwardly. And any discrepancy between the two is a lack of my proper self-realization. It's a lack of my becoming fully the human I am supposed to be, or I am deep down. And you can hear in this resonances of what we hear around us today, especially in transgenderism, right? Okay, I have a male body, but I am a woman. Not I feel like I'm a woman, but I'm not. So I feel like that way there's an issue. But I actually am a woman, because if I feel like I'm a woman, right? You can say, but wait a minute, but you've got a male body. So are you a woman or a man? Well, this is a metaphysical question. People have to realize this. It's a metaphysical question. What role does the body have to play in the definition of who you are? And what role does the mind, the inner subjective self, play? Right? Is it all the physical and the psychology means absolutely nothing? Is it all psychology and the body means nothing? Is it both? These are metaphysical questions. And the fact that we have gone from, in just a couple years, especially on the transgender issue, 10 years ago, gender identity disorder, that's what it was called. That means if you have a male body and you feel like you're a female or vice versa, then you have a disorder. Now, we're not blaming you morally for that because it's a disorder. Okay, you couldn't help it, but people recognize there's a disorder. It's not supposed to be the case, quote unquote. If you have a male body, you should identify as a man and feel like a man. And if you don't, okay, there's a disorder there. We need to try to figure out what to do. Right? That then changes to gender dysphoria. Dysphoria just means, okay, I'm uncomfortable with it. So it's no longer a question of you're objectively like out of kilter or off kilter, out of sync with your biology, and that's a problem because you're supposed to be one integrated person, right? It now becomes, okay, dysphoria. Well, if you're troubled by that or uncomfortable, okay, then you've got dysphoria, we'll try to help you. And now just a couple of years later, even saying gender dysphoria is considered offensive to many in these movements. And the idea is like, no, I am a woman or I am a man in the wrong body, period, right? And the body's wrong, the body means nothing. The objective kind of physiology, it doesn't matter. It's all the psychology. It's all, so it's the maximum. And so Truman will say, well, this is, Rousseau would have been aghast, probably, but he would say this is kind of the ultimate logical outcome of this idea of making the internal, giving such primacy to the internal.
But this is not really new in the West. We have this idea of dualism, which goes back to the ancient Greeks, where the idea is you have the body and the soul is preeminently important. That's the precious thing. That's the soul is that which you gain knowledge of the divine and become divine in a way. And the body is seen as like a prison. It's called a prison in Platonic philosophy. So this is the old hoary notion of dualism, which goes back to the ancient Greeks, resurfacing post-Renaissance in Rousseau and his thinking. But it's not really new. It's a fundamental category that we see much earlier in Greek thought, resurfacing in the modern world, and is very contrary to the Abrahamic faith. So the Hebrew Bible, for example, has a much more integrated, holistic understanding of the human being as being one, so a part soul, part mind, part body, not as dualism where it's split apart. Right. So I think we're seeing some deep Western tributaries here surfacing up again in the modern times, which are not really new. Okay, they have certain new configurations, but the fundamental metaphysical duality is there over millennia, I would argue.
Right. And again, I think that's a great point. And I think, really like the Arabs say, la jadida tahta shams, there's nothing new under the sun, like it's plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, right? There's really nothing new. All of these ideas, atheism, is all, just recycled from like the sophists and ancient, but it takes a different guy. So you're right that you have that dualism, but I think it's given a specific valence in the modern period that, it becomes sort of this very specific outgrowth, so to say, of something that had seeds there before, but was also kind of balanced out by other types of considerations, which fell by the wayside. And then you get this kind of excrescence, right? This outgrowth of this kind of like very radical internalization and subjectivization and personalization and individualization of the notion of the human being, right? And this is absolutely fundamental to the modern, and this is at the base of people saying, well, this is who I am, right? It's not just sexuality, right? And the idea is because you're not anything other than your internal feelings. And if you're going to deny me that, well, then you're denying me my very humanity.
Well, what's
tragic about this? Why people say that, but the whole thing is kind of like there's a wrong term been taken. But it helps us
what's tragic about this is that because we've been here before in some ways. Yes, there are unique configurations, as you say. The West keeps on having to go over the same ground over and over again and relearning the same lessons. There's no stability or continuity in the Western tradition. It's this complex composite of different traditions, pagan, Christian, Jewish, and so on. And they keep on throwing up the same paradigms, and we have to go through the same heartache and catastrophe again and again, learning the same lessons. And Islam obviously presents itself as a final dispensation, but it offers stability and a kind of divine wisdom in the social order. So we don't have to keep on searching for solutions to these problems. We've got the perfect template, which is in part the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but also the teaching of the Quran and so on. So but Muslims are spared this agony of these convulsions of going over the same thing over and over again because they have this the Sunnah, I suppose, that they can follow.
Exactly, and that's why the Sunnah is so important. It's really the firm, al-urwat al-wuthqa in the Quran, that it's the firmest handhold, right? Holding on to the religion, holding on to the rope of Allah. Hold on altogether to the rope of God and do not separate from it. Do not separate from each other, because that is what brings you to safety. Otherwise, you're just going to be adrift, literally, and drown.